also your product had one thing that most didn't have at the time too, was the predictive capability. Be able to generate go all the way through the analysis, and at the end of the day, come up with your future programs, maintenance and capital. So I think, and that's where people really jumped. They wanted to go from nothing to got the magic tool. You were fortunate enough to have that at the time as well. So there was a big uptake of Predictor.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And that is the whole game of strategic planning. We had that nailed well before anyone even had attempted to look at it. And the reason it was successful, I come back to the subject matter experts and the specialists, people like yourselves, for example, that really understand how to create a model of the future. Specialists that understand how to have a dialogue with the community, so your strategic asset management plan is in sync with reality. Subject matter experts that understand the Ostro's definition of pavement condition as opposed to just a 1 to 5.
Yeah.
It's the depth, and the depth makes all the difference. It doesn't matter which business you look at. The depth and the subject matter expertise makes all the difference.
And then the demand for the cloud. Now, in the early 2000s, I suppose, actually later 2000s, 2008 or thereabouts, MAV was pushing for the cloud and had a lot of pushback. But now it's as common as mud and everyone's on it. How did that impact on your software?
That's a great question, right? And this is where I always, and my grandfather had taught us this as well with all the businesses he'd built, is you need a solid co-founder who is also in the space that you are heading towards. And all the credit for the cloud goes to Joel, because whilst we could have merrily gone on our ride, just sticking with what we had, an on-premise desktop platform, and patched it and patched it and patched it to look and feel like the cloud, which a lot of our competitors were saying. Joel made the bold decision of saying, now we'll rewrite everything from scratch to make ours the true cloud platform in 3 years' time, because he predicted this was going to happen. So in 2015, we made that bold step of plunging every cent we had in our profits. We all took a lot of haircuts in terms of our rims, and we really dedicated ourselves to building a true cloud platform in under 3 years. Massive team, a lot of very, very tough days of having to deal with maintaining an existing platform and keeping the customers on the journey, yet bringing them along with you with the promise of something that would absolutely change their game in 3 years' time if they stuck with us. And credit to Joel, every single one, and I say not one single client left in that space, and progressively they've all now shifting to the cloud. So that was a bold move compared to our competitors. And I'm not being patronizing about any competitors. I know it's difficult to make a decision like that because it's a lot of money and it's a lot of time, and it's also the risk with customers walking away if you don't deliver. But a lot of them were patching the desktop product and kind of making it a pseudo cloud. Whereas in 2018, when the specifications start to come out for true cloud, we were fortunate to be the only one to tick the boxes with all the key elements.
So not only after that, a short time after that, when did you actually break the American market?
So around about that time, so 2017, we decided to step into the US via Canada. I was helping a lot of the Canadian municipalities back then in terms of just thought leadership and mentoring to get on board with the IPWEA program, as well as the mandate for the accounting standards update.
Yeah.
As you know, Canada went through the same sort of asset management roadmap that we did, which is having asset management plans generation 1 mandated by 2020, and then generation 3 and 4 plans with service levels mandated by 2024. And that was driving a wave of asset management frameworks and advancement in Canada. So we decided to invest in that market, again, sinking every cent of the profit we were making in Australia into that venture. And one of the five, Brad Campbell, we placed Brad in Canada and asked him to literally steer the ship single-handed. And it was quite successful. We had over 45 pilots successfully deployed there in the space of about 3 years. And then we slowly started to venture into the US market, where there is no mandate, there is no requirement for strategic asset planning as of now. But we picked up some really quality staff in that country that were passionate about this stuff. And we started to lift the lid of the strategic asset management thinking in the US. So countless masterclasses, thought leadership webinars, association with the Government Finance Officers Association in the US. And we now find ourselves in a spot where the finance professionals in the US have really, really taken on the mandate of fixing that future infrastructure deficit. And we find ourselves in a great space, having the methodologies and the logistics and the training programs to actually solve that problem.
And so now, where is it at in the US?
The US is really coming to grips with what does this mean from a mandate perspective. There are a number of agencies, at least thousands and thousands of governments that have done this type of planning, but without any mandatory requirement. And when that happens, you get pockets of excellence in the DOT or in some municipalities or in the water utilities. You get pockets of excellence, but there's no consistency in terms of how data is assessed or a long-term financial plan is constructed. And this will come as a surprise to you, but even GFOA's best practice policy. So I'm now on the committee of the Government Finance Officers Association as an international advisor. And we have just released a best practice policy in long-term capital planning. They call it multi-year capital planning, which traditionally used to be 5 years. But we've now successfully developed a 30-year best practice policy as a minimum to make governments realize that this is not a 5-year game. This is not fixing what we can see as the worst assets, but this is really about worrying. This is really worrying about those assets that haven't really hit the grade C or the grade D yet out of an A to F scale, and starting to put in place mechanisms to stop those assets from getting to an E or an F. And that's really taking shape as we're rolling out training programs in the US. I've just come back from the Portland masterclass, where for the first time in 117 years, the Finance Professionals Organization, GFOA, we had the first ever masterclass in strategic asset management. The feedback to the GFOA has been tremendous. They now want to run these masterclasses in every state. The GFOA is now equipped to run asset management classes on their own throughout their season of the training program. They're collaborating with the IPWEA from Australia with the ProCert and the asset management certification, which will lead to a lot more capacity building into the US municipalities. We're very fortunate that Terry Vesicluse and Chris Morrill from the GFOA are now coming back to Australia in June at the IPWEA Asset Management Congress. And I think by doing that, we are furthering the cause and the capacity build requirement, which Sandy, you would know better than anyone. It's so important with succession planning to make sure that the younger generation comes up to the charge with the skills that are required to play in this space. So it's not engineering, it's not accounting, it's not just finance. not
Sorry.
just economics,
Yep.
it's all of that.
I think that's a big thing, and it's still to be realised or recognised and then realised in a lot of places. It sounds like they're certainly understanding it, that the necessity for that. And one of the problems I've always had, and I've always said myself, is that you need to employ different staff. It's not just the engineer. The engineer shouldn't be doing this, some of these activities. It should be given to the people who know, the data analysts, the accountants, your community people. If you're going out to talk to the community, use them. The engineers shouldn't be standing there talking to the community, trying to relate the levels of service to public speak. They do all right after Friday night at the pub, but yeah, it's a bit hard for them to communicate that way. So you always get the people that are the experts in that area. Enjoyed this video? Press the like button and subscribe. If you'd like to see more, please click on the Patreon link below and sign up.